everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold, here with tonight's weekly lecture. This is take 2 because I forgot to push record and I already lectured for about 4 minutes. So anyway, I want to thank our sponsor, Vajja Volin. He's had to put up with me twice so far, and he's heard me thank him twice, but you're only going to hear the one time. Vajja has sponsored the lecture on the 10 greatest women of all time, and I spent a lot of time doing research to find out who other people thought were the best women of all time, and then I made my list different than theirs, because I don't agree with some of them, but I think the 10 people on my list would be on the top 20 of anybody else's list. And if you'd like to sponsor a lecture that's as interesting as this one, hopefully, contact my wife Karen, and her contact info is in the video description. Okay, so this will be very interesting because I'm going to go back and forth between Wikipedia and ChessBase to talk about the player and then show a game or a game fragment. It's about 50-50 because I don't really have time to analyze 10 games and talk about the players, because that would be like a 2-hour lecture because there's a lot to talk about. First person I want to mention is Pia Cramling. I learned today that her full name is Pia Ann Ross Della Cramling. Wow, that's a name. And she's currently 61, and she's still active, and she's still playing board 1 for the Swedish women's Olympic team, which is going on right now. And I don't want to read the Wikipedia articles verbatim, but she's from a chess family. Her daughter's quite famous, Anna Cramling, who's a famous streamer, and she's a WFM. Her husband is the Spanish Grandmaster Juan Manuel Ballon Lopez. They've been married for, I think, since 1988, so a long time. And they were the first chess couple married who were both grandmasters. And I have to differentiate because a lot of people who watch videos on the internet, or just people who are on the internet, there's a title called Grandmaster, like I'm a Grandmaster, somehow. And then there's the title Women Grandmaster. And if you're a woman Grandmaster, you're not one of the top 10 women of all time. We're talking about the title Grandmaster. And Pia Cramling is one of the earliest women to get this title. She was one of the first 5 people to become a Grandmaster. And, you know, in the 70s and 80s, you could count on one hand how many Grandmasters there were who were women, and now you need a lot more hands. Now, it's something like 80, I think, but it used to be like 3 or 4. So when I was growing up in chess, when I was a kid, there were no women Grandmasters, and then a couple of people on the list became Grandmasters, along with other people who we're going to mention later. So Cramling was one of the first Grandmasters. One of the reasons I have her on the list is she was the highest rated woman in the world, briefly, and she's played tournaments and she's never retired, even though she's in her 60s, and she still has good results, and she's still higher rated than me. And she was about 25-50 FIDE at her peak, and that was a long time ago, probably the equivalent of 2650 today. And what it doesn't mention, for reasons I don't understand, is her brother is Dan Cramling. He's an IM. So somebody go to Wikipedia and add that in. Okay, and some of the players I'm going to show complete games, and some of them I'm just going to show a fragment. So let's get to Pia's game. This is a game Pia played against Viktor Korchnoi in Biel 1984. 84, that sounds like around when Cramling was at her best. Probably, I think 80s was her best. So, okay. So they played Carol Khan, some kind of Panov variation where white gets an isolated pawn. And I've had white and black in this position. This is one of the main lines now even. Okay, P is white. I always like white in these positions because the bishop on c8 is quite a poor piece. Okay, and Pia develops in castles and sacrifices her d-pawn because then white gets a big lead in development. Korchnoi just castles instead of taking. Pia says, "Are you sure you don't want to take?" And Korchnoi says, "All right, I'll take." And the reason he took with the bishop instead of the knight is if you take with the knight, in this position, queen e4 threatens checkmate and the bishop. So by Korchnoi taking with the bishop first, if Pia takes and plays the same, threatening the knight and then black can play either knight f5 and also knight f6, attacking the queen and defending the knight with this discovered defense. Okay, so Pia didn't take the bishop on d4. She played knight takes d5. And let me get back to this. Yeah. Okay. I'm back. Okay. She took the knight on d5. Okay. And then Korchnoi took with the queen. Bishop e4 attacks the bishop. Now, the bishop has two defenders, but I'm going to take one of the defenders, so that means that the queen has to stay on the bishop. Okay, so Korchnoi did. Takes. You have to take with the pawn, because your queen needs to defend your bishop. Knight takes. And white's down a pawn here, but as I said about 5 minutes ago, black's bishop is terrible, and black's bishop is still terrible. Rook e8, rook d1, harassing the queen, and queen e5. White is dominating the dark squares, and black's extra pawn is meaningless. There's no way black's going to get a pass pawn or do anything with the pawns, and white really dominates the center and has an attack coming on the king side, and black can't get his pieces out. Okay, so he wanted to trade queens. She said no. He said please. She said no. And he said fine, I'll attack your bishop. And I'm sure if Korchnoi definitely not going to play for a draw. Korchnoi's old school, so his opinion of women still lives in the 1950s and 60s. So he doesn't think, never thought women could compete with him, even though many women beat him over the years. But he wasn't happy about it. Okay, so he played a5, never wants to repeat moves. Bishop c5. And she played f4, very aggressive move. I think she wanted to stop Korchnoi from playing f6 and e5, which gets the bishop out. And she wants to attack on the king side. It doesn't look like black is a pawn ahead. Black's position looks terrible. Bishop a6, finally getting the bishop out. Rook d7. Queen c2. Korchnoi wants to get his queen over to the king side to defend. Bishop d4, threatening mate. Queen g6, stopping mate. Rook e1, getting the last piece into the game. White's pieces totally dominate the board. Never play f6. Queen c5. And black just doesn't really have any moves. Black is super passive. All of white's pieces are perfectly placed. Korchnoi said, hey, let's trade queens. Then I won't lose. And Cramling said, nope, no trading queens. You're going to lose. And then Korchnoi finally played e5, even though Pia played f4, so he couldn't play that. And she played bishop c5. She doesn't want to trade pieces, and she can't take with the rook because two people can have a checkmating attack also. That's a funny checkmate. So she just plays bishop c5. White's pieces dominate the board, and now Korchnoi made a move that lost immediately, but his pawn structure's terrible. White's rook dominates the 7th rank, and black's rooks are useless. He played queen f6 to trade queens, and unfortunately for Korchnoi, I assume he was in time trouble, White can trade queens and still have a mating attack, and that's what Pia did. And she did a rook lift, and now here comes rook g3 check, rook g7, and the truth hurts because you're going to get checkmated. And this is already resignable. He played king h8, hoping for rook g3, rook g8, but Pia played rook h3, and the game's over. We're going to play rook takes check and rook here mate, and you can't defend with the bishop because your bishop's hanging to both of my rooks. So after rook h3, Korchnoi resigned, and for those of you who were paying attention, he never moved his rook off of a8. So Korchnoi was pretty strong in 1984, playing world championship matches and such. Okay, I think in 84 he lost a candidates match to Kasparov. Okay, so good game from Pia. She's number 10. Let's go to number 9. Aleksandra Goryachkina, I think, or Goryachkina. I'm going to mispronounce all the names, although I think I pronounced Pia Cramling correctly. Goryachkina is pretty young. She's 25. And a couple of years ago, she played in the Russian Championship. And she's the only woman to ever do that, I think. And she got a good score. And her FIDE rating has been over 2,600. And that was when she was in her early 20s. And she's been one of my favorite female players to follow over the last few years because she was in her early 20s and she was definitely one of the top 3 or 4 women in the world. And I think if I do the same lecture in 10 years, if I'm around then, she's going to be higher on the list. She's currently the 4th rated woman in the world. She was the challenger in the Women's World Championship in 2020. She lost a tiebreak to Wenjun, currently the world champion. 3-time Russian women's champion, and she won the FIDE Women's World Cup last year. And it talks about her, shows her pictures when she was a kid. She won tons of junior tournaments and so forth. And she became a grandmaster at the age of 17. So pretty impressive. And this was her world championship match 4 years ago, which was tied after 12 games. And then she lost the rapid playoff to Wenjun. And very long article because she's won so many tournaments, even though being so young. And I think there's a really bright future ahead. And I expect her in the next 3 or 4 years to be the women's world champion. She played against another female player in the Russian higher league women's championship in 2014. So she was only 15 when this game was played, but her FIDE rating was over 2,400. So Goryachkina has been a strong player for a long time. Okay, so they have some kind of semi-Slav, Catalan, Dutch. They keep transposing openings. This game doesn't take very long, so don't blink. Okay, White maneuvers her knight to d3. Typically, White wants to play bishop f4 and trade off that nice bishop on d6. So Black prevents that. Goryachkina gets her knight to a nice square. h6 is a little slow. And then White advances on the queen side. Gets big queen side play there. Black hasn't started attacking yet. And eventually, in this position, black makes, I don't know if it's the losing move, but she lost pretty quickly. She played e5, which black wants to play, but the center and queen side's falling apart. Takes, then white played the excellent knight b4, threatening the pawn on c6. What's funny about this is the knight is blocking the bishop's defense, so we could just move the knight, and the bishop would defend the pawn, but there's nowhere to move the knight. So the truth hurts. So black took on d4, and after taking on c6, black played queen takes e2. That's why black did this. Knight takes d4, material is equal, the queen is attacked, queen c4, and black's losing anyway. The f pawn is incredibly weak. The knight on c6 is a monster. Black's pieces are all terrible on the back rank. The d pawn is isolated and weak. So terrible position for black. But this was a nice tactic. Black blundered with queen c4, and now white's winning, which is good. So if you're watching on YouTube after the fact, pause your video and try to find the move that Goryachkina played. And remember, she's only 15, but this is a very nice tactic. This would be one of the tougher ones on Puzzle Rush. Okay, so Aleksandra played, the suspense is killing my computer. Bishop takes d5 check. The truth hurts. And your queen's hanging, so you can't take with the knight, because I take your queen. So you have to take with the queen, because your queen's attacked, your king's attacked, but then knight e7 check wins your queen. So after bishop takes d5 check, black resigned. That's a brutal final move, because obviously black didn't see it, and then when your opponent plays it, you're like, no, what's happening? Okay, so Goryachkina, number 9. Now we go to number 8. That's Koneru Humpy. She was, I think, one of the few players to get to 2,600 FIDE. And actually, she got her Grandmaster title at an even younger age than Judah Polgar by 3 months. She was 15 years old. And she's 37, but she's played in so many Olympiads for India and candidates matches and so forth. She won 3 gold medals at the World Youth Tournament. You can see in the Asian Games, she wins all kinds of titles. And very long career, and she still plays. And I just saw her a few months ago in Toronto. She played in the women's candidates tournament. She's been the women's world rapid champion. She's been on many Olympic teams. She's won well in the Grand Prix. These are all the women's Grand Prix titles. Gold, 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 gold. Truth hurts. Then there's her achievements here and awards that she's won. And she's very famous in India. And I'll tell you a funny story, since I'm the guy giving the lecture. I had some trouble in India with customs. And I told the customs guy I was friends with Vishy Anand, which impressed the customs guy. I showed him a picture of me and Vishy. I said, this was us like a week ago. And he said, do you know Koneru Humpy as well? And I said, well, I don't know her personally, but I know who she is. So, very well known in India, been best player in India forever, and just one of the best women of all time, has beaten many grandmasters, and has been one of the top, I would say, 15 women in the world for over 20 years. Okay, so let's show you what she's got. Okay, and she has black in this game. And this is a partial game that she played. This is against Shaobin Wu, who's 2,500 GM. This was played in 2005. Black is better because black has this beautiful passed pawn. So after bishop g2, Humpy played bishop g5, hoping the queen would move, then she could promote her pawn. So the guy played f4, and that opens up this diagonal to his king. So Humpy retreated, and now bishop c5 check is annoying. And whichever way white moves with the king, there's bad for both of them. He made the wrong decision and went to f1, figuring that's good in stopping the passed pawn. And Humpy played queen c7, and black has a big threat here, which white missed. And white said, oh boy, this pawn's only defended once, and it's attacked once. I'm going to attack it again. And he blundered and played bishop e4. And again, I feel bad for white, because he obviously didn't see Humpy's next move. And then when the move is made, you instantly realize, oh no, what have I done? And the truth hurts. And the game is over now. He thought he could try to take the d pawn, but now his king on f1 is misplaced, and Humpy made the winning move, queen takes c3. White resigned, because if white takes, we play discovered check, and there's no way to stop me from queening, and then black is up a bishop. So queen takes c3 was the brutal blow that white missed, and Humpy wins with tactics after looking like she would win with her passed pawn. Actually, she did. By taking, she got to promote her passed pawn. But her opponent spoiled her fun by resigning. Truth hurts. Okay, next on the list, Humpy's number 8. Number 7, Wenjun, who's currently the world women's champion. She's 33, born in Shanghai. Her peak rating was over 2,600 FIDE. She became the 5th woman to become 2,600 FIDE. She's a 4-time women's world champion, having first won the title in 2018. She learned chess at the age of 7. She's won all kinds of titles in Asia, in mixed chess and in women's chess. And she also often plays on Chinese national women's teams, and usually they win gold and silver medals. And she also has a degree in economics. So Wenjun, I have her at number 7. Let's see what we have for Wenjun. Okay, this is a game where she was black in the Chinese Chess League in 2017. She likes to play very sharp, complicated chess. And again, this game doesn't last very long because of a very long tactical sequence that wins the game immediately. So they played all this theory. This position's occurred many times at the Grandmaster level. Again, black's bishop on c8, as per usual, isn't good. So Wenjun played b6 and bishop b7. Knight to the center. Black is just better because white has an isolated pawn. And now the queen and bishop are lined up for a later checkmate. White played knight e1 and said, you're never going to checkmate me, and maybe I'll play bishop f3 and kick your queen. Rook d8, bishop f3, queen retreats, and queen e4. And queen e4 is a tactical mistake, and if you can look like 10 moves ahead, like Wenjun can, then you'll figure out why. This game was played 7 years ago, and her FIDE rating was 2572. So this was, I think, the year before she became the world champion. And it looks like queen e4 pins the knight because the bishop is hanging, and Wenjun saw further than her opponent. She played knight takes d4. Confusing the audience, which is us. Now, that attacks the queen, and it takes a pawn, so the most obvious move for white is to take that free bishop. I don't really see another move for white, so he took, She traded queens. Now white's a piece ahead. Then she took on c1. Rook takes c1. Knight e2 check. King f1. Knight takes c1. And possibly white saw this when he played queen e4. I don't know if he did. And he thought, well, I have two pieces for a rook. Unfortunately, Wenjun saw further. White resigned here, realizing after bishop takes, I play rook d1 attacking your bishop. Your bishop can't go to d2 or b2 because those are attacked. You can't defend your bishop, so we'll move it to a normal square. Then bishop c3 wins the knight on e1, and black is up the exchange and a pawn in a very easily winning endgame. And Wenjun had to see all of that when she played knight takes d4. Easy for her to calculate. Takes, check, here takes. Bishop takes, rook d1, and bishop c3, winning the game. And after knight takes c1, white resigned. So that game was about equal, maybe a tiny bit better for black. Then the game just ended on a tactical shot that white missed. And Wenjun likes tactics. She likes sharp, complicated positions. So what wasn't too surprising. Okay. And that's the wrong button. Okay, so 10, Pia Cramling. 9, Aleksandra Goryachkina. 8, Humpy Koneru. 7 was Wenjun. And for 6, I have Susan Polgar. Used to be known as Zhuzha Polgar. Americanized her name a bit. She was born in Budapest from a chess family. She's been very popular on the tour. She retired a few years ago. She was coaching the last 10 years or so of her career, and her college teams in the U.S. won all kinds of national championships at Texas Tech and at Webster. Her husband is a player that I played as a kid. He was a strong junior player, Paul Truong, and we actually played in the 1984 U.S. Junior Championship. And he was her business manager, and then they got down to business. There's a lot of information on Susan Polgar on the internet. Her Wikipedia page is huge. She's won gold medals in the Olympiad for the U.S. and Hungary. She's won gold medals on board 1. She had some streak where she didn't lose a game in like 5 Olympiads in a row. And a lot of her career, before she retired, was coaching at Texas Tech and at Webster. And she has many notable games, lots of books that she's written or co-authored or are about her. Some controversy, which is good. Got to have some controversy. And not only is she the 6th greatest woman of all time, in my opinion, she's one of the top players in her family. One of the top. Okay. So what do we got for Susan? Not as famous as her sister. We haven't gotten to yet. Actually, maybe Susan's more famous. Okay. This was a game. Susan was white against Leonid Yudasin. Yudasin was a candidate in the late 80s, early 90s, and lost a match to Cramling in a candidates match. And in 1991, they played this game when Yudasin was at the top of his game. Okay, and this game featured very complicated sacrifices and confusion, which Susan saw better than her opponent. So in this position, which has equal material, white doubled rooks on the E file, attacking the rook on e7. Yudasin took. Susan took, threatening the knight. And Yudasin played the Zwischenzug, d takes c4, threatening Susan's queen. And also it's sort of a skewer. And Susan said, oh, you want my queen? Be my guest. And she took the knight on f6. Obviously, you can't take the queen because rook e8 is mate. And that's why a couple moves ago when we started this position, Susan put her rook on e1, seeing that this variation could happen. So after she took, white's up a piece. Black played g takes f6. Now black is threatening the queen because the king has an escape square on g7. Queen takes f6. Again, if you take my knight, then rook e8 his mate. So he played c3, and he said, yay, my passed pawn's really strong. And c2. So black's down a piece, but that pawn on the 7th rank looks daunting. Queen h6, not only stopping the pawn, but more importantly, threatening knight f6 check and queen takes h7 mate. Bishop g6, stopping the mate. Knight f6 check. Black played the engine move, king h8, the only legal move. And now Susan did several tactics in one move. It's interference and a fork and all kinds of stuff. She played the move knight e8. Knight e8 threatens the queen. Knight e8 threatens queen g7 mate. And knight e8 threatens queen f8 mate. That's a lot of threats. And if black takes the knight, white checkmates in one move. I guess if I was a computer, I'd play queen c5 check so I wouldn't get mated right away. My opponent would have to move their king, and then I would get mated. So in this position, Yudasin resigned, and that looked more like a game Judah Polgar would win with white than Susan. But Susan was quite strong, obviously overshadowed by her sister in chess strength, but also better than her other sister. And better than her dad. I actually played in a chess tournament in Brussels before all of you were born. And not only were the 3 Polgars playing in the tournament, the dad was also playing, confusing the audience. The mom was there, but she wasn't playing. Okay, Susan Polgar, very famous. I have her 6th all time. 5th, I have former women's world champion Nona Gaprindashvili. She started playing chess at 5. She's won dozens and dozens of women's tournaments and also mixed tournaments. She got the title of Grandmaster in the 1970s at Lone Pine, 1978. And she's played chess in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And she doesn't play chess anymore, as far as I know, although she might. She might have played in the women's senior championship, possibly. So maybe she does still play chess. So her Wikipedia is quite long because she's been Soviet women's champion. She played board 1 in the Olympiad for the Soviet Union and for Georgia like 1,000 times. She won all kinds of gold medals, and she was the most famous chess player in the world in the 70s and 80s. And the best thing about Nona Gaprindashvili is the Netflix series The Queen's Gambit. They erroneously mentioned in the series that she got her title without playing any men. She only played women, showing that the star of Queen's Gambit, Anya Taylor-Joy, was better because she played men too. So a lawsuit commenced, since none of that's true. Gaprindashvili played men her whole life. And they settled out of court, so she actually got something, but we don't know what. So that's good. She sticks it to the man, even in her 80s. Okay, and she was playing for world championships often, and her main opponent, I actually have one above her next. So Gaprindashvili we have at 5. And here's really complicated end of a game that she had. Okay, in this position, white's threatening the queen. That's Gaprindashvili's queen. She's playing Aleksander Sznapik. And rook a3 and rook a8 mate is also good. If you don't like that, there's rook a3 and queen a8 mate. So Gaprindashvili, she played queen h5. And the idea is, if you play rook a3, I take with check, and then I have queen e2 mate. That's a pretty cool mate. So her opponent played rook h3 and was like, well, now the queen moves, then I play rook a3, and then I win. Hooray for me, thought her opponent. She played queen g5, and white confidently played rook a3. And a lot of players who are club players and class players might resign here with black. But instead of resigning, Gaprindashvili won the game. It's amazing that black can stop checkmate, since it doesn't look like black can stop checkmate. Gaprindashvili sacrificed her queen. Queen takes c1 check, forcing white to get rid of the mating threat. And then she plays the amazing fork, bishop takes b2, with the idea if queen takes, rook e1 is mate. An amazing defense from Gaprindashvili that her opponent must have missed. And now she's going to take the rook, and the queen can't defend the rook because the queen has to stop rook e1 mate. So white gave a couple of checks, rook check, queen check, and then white can stop mate. Knight e4 stops rook e1 mate. But this position's winning for black because white's king is too exposed, and the black rooks are excellent. Bishop check. The king goes in the corner where it's going to get mated again. Rook e5, attacking the f-pawn. g4, white doesn't get mated. Attacks the knight. And this position is just winning for black. White's king is too exposed. White's down material. And bishop b4 threatens rook e1 mate. So white has to give up the queen, and black has a ton of extra material. So in a position where it looked like black might resign, black actually won by force by sacking her queen, then sacking her bishop on b2. Then black was up a lot of material. I really like that finish. That was played in 1976. Gaprindashvili's prime, I would say, 1976. Okay, number 4 of all time is the vanquisher of Nona Gaprindashvili, Maia Chiburdanidze. And she was the 6th women's world champion, beating Gaprindashvili. She was the 2nd woman after Gaprindashvili to be awarded the Grandmaster title by FIDE. She played on 9 gold medal women's teams in the Chess Olympiad. She was born in Georgia, in the USSR, and very strong as a young player. She became women's world champion when she was 17. Already the best woman in the world. And she played chess forever and ever and ever. And recently, she's been retired and doesn't play in competitive tournaments anymore. But her career of being women's world champion lasted many years. I think she was the longest reigning women's world champion of all time. And she represented USSR, Georgia on many occasions, and played in many top tournaments, and was clearly the best female player in the world for many, many years. She was the youngest women's world champion ever until it was broken by somebody we're going to talk about next, actually. Okay, so let's see what Chiburdanidze did. F9's not going to help. Okay, this is, again, she had white. And this is against another famous chess player, Nigel Short. But Nigel was probably 17 when this game was played. Played in 1983 in Dortmund. And they got a crazy position where Nigel's up the exchange, which means that white sacrificed the exchange. Go Maia. Okay, Nigel played queen e5, forking the 2 pieces. So, of course, when you have 2 pieces forked, the typical response is to ignore them both. And she played bishop e3, developing her bishop. And Nigel's like, oh boy, which piece do I take? And he took the knight on e4. Now, one of Nigel's most famous games is against Jan Timman, which many of you know. Nigel walks his king up the board and gets it to h6. And Timman resigns because white's going to checkmate black with the king being helpful. And here, this was an earlier example of Nigel walking his king up the board, except he didn't checkmate his opponent. Maia was checkmating him. Queen check, king c7, bishop b6 check. Now black is up a piece. Nigel plays for the win. Very suspicious. Plays king c5. Probably black should have tried to repeat the moves and draw the game. b4 check. And if you take with the queen, then your knight is hanging. If you take with the knight, you give my rook the c1 square. So he took with the king. That's what Nigel does. He walks his king up the board. Bishop f3, stopping black's threats and attacking the queen. Queen moves away. Rook b1 check. Nigel blocks with the knight, not moving his king up anymore. Queen d2 check. Time to move our king up more. You can't play queen a5 because the black queen is defending a5. Otherwise, that would be mate. So this queen is overworked. It's defending a5 and b2. So Maia played rook takes b2. If Nigel takes the rook, now queen a5 is a very cute mate. Unless you have black, then maybe it's not so cute. Nigel played b5. Rook b3 check. King a4. And now a beautiful finishing move. Always retreat. Bishop to d1. Yeah, now Nigel's king is not so good. And in this position, black resigned because I'm going to discover check you and win your queen or win your rook or checkmate you. Whichever's the funniest. In fact, if I'm correct, I'm not saying I'm correct, rook d3, e3, f3, g3, and h3 are all checkmate. That's a lot of threats. Discovered mate. I just discovered it. So Nigel resigned. Nigel wasn't a world-class player yet, but when Nigel was 16 or 17, he was pretty strong. Already grandmaster strength. So that's an example of Nigel moving his king up, but it not working out. So Chiburdanidze, I have as 4. Now the third best player of all time is probably the second best player of all time, but due to sentimental reasons, I have to put her at 3. And that's Yifan, who I've met in St. Louis. Yifan is the second highest rated player who ever lived for women. She got to the very high 2600s, 2686 FIDE. Only one person on our list has surpassed that. We haven't gotten to her yet. And she was women's world champion, gold medalist for China, gold medal on board 1. She won every tournament she played in. And recently, she semi-retired because she went to Oxford. And she had a Rhodes Scholarship. And she still occasionally plays in blitz and rapid tournaments and does well. And very long career of beating everybody. Here's a picture when she was 11 at the World Team Championship. Man, truth hurts. And they go year by year and show her at different tournaments and all of her successes. It's a very long article. And strength-wise, for chess strength, she's the second greatest player of all time. But I'm a tough guy to make a list. I put her 3rd. Man, the truth hurts. And she has the longest Wikipedia article of any player on the list. It never ends. There's her with another player on the list, Susan Polgar. And very long article, very detailed with all of her results. And Yifan is definitely one of the top 2 or 3 women who ever lived. It's hard to see anybody even playing now that will surpass her. Okay, and she's number 3. And here's the end of a game that she played. I really like the end of the game. She has the black pieces against Jan Smeets. This was played in Corus in 2008. It's now called Tata Steel. Black's queening, white's queening, and both kings are exposed. Black is up the exchange. And the game ended in Searching for Bobby Fischer fashion. If you've seen that movie, you're going to like the end of this game. So queen d5, centralizing the queen, threatening queen check, picking up the rook on d1. Queen c1, we have another king walk. Check, 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 check. And in this position, if white plays king f5, I think black has several ways to win. I sort of like g6 check, because then if king g4, this is mate. And if king g5, this should do the trick. Okay, so Smeets played bishop e5, and black must have seen the movie 2008. Yeah, the movie was already out. So if you saw Searching for Bobby Fischer and you remember the end of the movie, this actually happened in this game. Yifan played rook takes e5 check, and white resigned. In the movie, this is what would have happened. And then queen h2 check, picks up the queen on b8. So black sacrificed the exchange. The exchange sacrifice was so strong that white resigned. Always sacrifice the exchange. That was a very nice finish, another nice king walk. And at that time, Smeets was higher rated than Yifan. And about 10 years ago, I played Smeets in the United Arab Emirates, and he beat me. So this is a revenge game. Teach you to beat me. I'll show you a game that you lost before you were born. Okay, number 2 player of all time. Again, it's sentimental. It's because it's the only woman I had heard of when I was growing up. It was well known that she was Grandmaster strength before the Grandmaster title existed. What's funny about that is every woman who has become a Grandmaster in chess is alive. None of them have died. Many male Grandmasters have died. No female Grandmasters have passed away. And the only reason I can say that is Vera Menchik never became a Grandmaster. She died in 1944. She actually died in the war. She was, I think, she was either in England or the Netherlands in a bomb camp. I think she was in England. But she was one of the top players in the world for men and women, and she was way better than the other women. So I put her like in the class of Morphy. Morphy was way better than everybody at that time. Vera Menchik in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s was way better than the other women. So she mainly played against men because she would beat a lot of the top male players in the world. She won the Women's World Championship 8 times in round-robin tournaments from 1927 to 1944. Amazing. She won every time she played. And long article about her, really old pictures from the 20s and 30s. Basically, when I was a kid, the only female player I'd heard of until Chiburdanidze and Gaprindashvili when I got a little bit older. And lots of pictures, and they used to call something the Vera Menchik Club. That was famous chess players who lost to her. And they have a list of people who were obviously GM strength who had lost a game to her, including Reshevsky, Samish, Max Erva, etc. Salo Floor, Grunfeld, Lilienthal, Neidorf, Rubinstein, Tartakauer, and Vidmar. So, I mean, she beat a lot of the best players in the world. She was way better than all other women. And it was at a time when women didn't really play chess. They weren't encouraged to play. There weren't a lot playing at tournaments. And they talk a lot about her personal life because she did a lot outside of chess publishing, and her death was terrible tragedy due to the Second World War, which you can read about. And lots of her tournaments and victories and matches are listed here. One of the World Championship matches, she won 11.5, 4.5. So, you know, she was way better than everybody at her time. Lots of memorable games. So I put Vera Menchik number 2. She's in the class of Morphe of dominating the world of chess when she was a player, 50, 60, 70 years before it became more common to see women playing in tournaments. Okay, and this is a game where you will know her name is the Lord. She's playing George Allen Thomas, and I must say, I've given a lot of lectures, and George Thomas is always on the losing end of these brilliant games. There's a lot of lectures I give where it's the guy I'm talking about versus Thomas. So the truth hurts. Okay, they castled opposite sides. Thomas recaptured the bishop on g7, and Menchik went to work on her opponent's king. She played knight f5 check. It's too dangerous to take with the g-pawn. We're opening up the g line, and white is threatening queen g7 mate and queen f6 mate. So he kept the g file blocked by taking with the knight. G takes, then black started to attack. a3. Menchik ignored the attack because there's no threat, and she played f6 check. If you take the pawn, Menchik could play queen check, check, queen f6 with unstoppable mate on g7. So he played king h8. That way, if Menchik plays queen h6, he can play rook g8 and stop mate. And that's what happened. Check, always play king b1. The knight is defending a2, so black doesn't really have an attack. Rook g8, hg, threatening g7 mate with advantage. It's not even mate, it's better than mate. Takes, and then Menchik finished the game with a very nice tactic. It's one you imagine you can play, but you never get the chance to play it. But you can see great players play it. And that's queen takes h7 check. Thomas resigned because after king takes, rook h1 is mate. So a brilliant attack from Vera Menchik, beating one of the best players in England, where she lived for quite a while. And there's so many Menchik games I can show you where she's beaten players that you've heard of in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And she was the only woman at that time who was competing with men and beating them regularly, the top men in the world. The number 1 player is no surprise to anybody, and that's Judith Polgar. And if you make a top 10 list like I did, I won't argue with any of your list, no matter who you put. But if you don't put Judith Polgar 1, that list is wrong. Okay? This is the only one everybody agrees on. Judith Polgar's number 1. She became a grandmaster at 15. Her peak FIDE rating was 2735. She was number 8 in the world. And she's the only woman to break 2700 FIDE. And she's beaten everybody. And when I say everybody, I'm going to list world champions that she's beaten. All of them. She's beaten Carlsen, Karpov, Kasparov, Kramnik, Spassky, Smyslov, Topalov, Anand, Ponomaryov, Halifman, and Kazimzhanov. The last 3 are suspicious world champions, but the first ones aren't. And she's done everything in chess, becoming a very young grandmaster, the first woman over 2,700, the first woman to beat like 8 world champions. And she was top 10 in the world, which no other woman has accomplished since or before. The Polgar sisters are a famous family. They were all very good, very young. I played Judith when she got her first IM norm, and I played her when she got her last GM norm. So I've played Judith more than once. I've been to the Polgar household in Budapest when I lived in Brussels and visited with them. And everybody agrees that she's the strongest female ever. You can argue Fischer, Kasparov, Morphy, Carlsen is the greatest player of all time, but you can't argue about Judith Polgar. There's no arguing. She's the greatest female player of all time, and it's not even close. And her Wikipedia might even be longer than Yifan's. Wow. Pretty good Wikipedia article. Very tactical player. Very, very strong at opening preparation and calculation. And one of the negative things she has in common with Vera Menchik was a lot of her family members, grandparents and were killed in the Holocaust. And her grandmother was a survivor of Auschwitz. And Menchik was killed in World War II. So, top two players. World War II wasn't kind to their families. Okay, now I could show you dozens and dozens of games of Judith Polgar. I could show her beating world champion after world champion, but this is my lecture. That means I'm going to show you a game that I played against her. And I had the black pieces. The game was about equal throughout, and I had black in this position. I'm a pawn up, but my g7 pawn is quite weak. And in this position, Judith can't take on g7 because I would checkmate her. So she played the move rook a3, and this was my biggest mistake of the game. The chess engine says bishop a4 is equal. And the position with perfect play by engines would be a draw. And I made the losing move. I played bishop d1. I didn't like my bishop on a4. And the bishop on a4 stops the white rook from infiltrating later. That's why bishop d1's no good. She played h3. So now I don't have back rank mate anymore. She made Luft. Rook e7, defending my pawn. And rook a8 check. And now we can see I have a problem. King f7 and king h7 are both bad. If king h7, she can play queen b1 check. The truth hurts. So I played king f7, and now my g pawn's not defended, and now she's threatening queen f6 checkmate. And the theme of this lecture, you thought, was the greatest women players of all time. But almost every game I'm showing you a big king march. Unfortunately, this one has my king marching. Check. Queen e6, stopping queen f6 mate. Rook f8 check. Check. I keep playing the only move. If queen d7, Judith would win my queen. So I play king d6. Check. King c5. Bishop f8 check. The truth hurts. Always play bishop f8. And in this position, if I play king c4, queen b4 is checkmate. So after bishop f8 check, I resigned. So bishop d1 was the losing move, allowing her rook to infiltrate. And my king went for a walk, and her king was nice tucked away on h2. So that's, I'm sure if you ask Judith what's the most important game you ever played, I'm sure she'll pick her game with me. I mean, she beat me. So that was in Dortmund in 1990. When I played in the Bundesliga, I played for Dortmund. That's why I got invited to the tournaments. As an aside, in this particular tournament, which was a strong round robin, everybody was a GM or an IM. I lost no games to men. Against men, I had 2 wins and 5 draws. And I lost to Judith Polgar and I lost to Sofia Polgar. So, and I was beating Sofia Polgar. I was +4. But that's what happens. Sometimes you lose every game. Then you start giving lectures. I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold. Once again, I want to thank Vajivolin for sponsoring the lecture, The 10 Greatest Women of All Time. I want to go over the list once again. Pia Cramling, number 10. Alexander Goryachkina, 9. Koneru Humpy, 8. Wenjun, 7. Susan Polgar, 6. Nona Gaprindashvili, 5. Maia Chiburdanidze, 4. Yifan, 3. Vera Menchik, 2. And the greatest woman of all time, not even close, is Judith Polgar. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you guys with more lectures next time. Bye.